Hello there, and welcome to the very first episode of a Woody Strikes Back podcast. I still haven't decided on a name, so that's what I'm going to call it for now. To be honest, I hadn't really made any plans to do a podcast. It's been something that's been on my mind for quite a while now, but I just felt like there's a lot to talk about when it comes to Star Wars at the moment. So I brought all of my thoughts together, and we're just gonna have a chat, and let's see how it goes. So, what's new with Star Wars? Well, the big thing at the moment is obviously we've now got the first 4 episodes of Skeleton Crew. They're all now out on Disney Plus, and we've got 4 more episodes yet to come. So I thought we'd talk a little bit about that, start off with kind of my overall thoughts and feelings on the series so far, what I'm expecting moving forward, and also a bit of a review on each individual episode. And I'll start off by saying, spoiler warning, I'll be going into some of the things discussed in each of the episodes so far. So if you haven't seen it already, go and check it out on Disney Plus and then come back and watch this. Or just carry on listening to this, if you want to. That's totally fine. For those of you who haven't seen it just yet, I will give a very kind of brief overview of what's happened so far, kind of what to expect going into the series. So this new Star Wars series follows a crew of 4 children from a hidden planet that's called Attin. Firstly, I'll say, I think that's quite clever. I presume it's a little bit of a nod to people who say 8080 wrong. Controversial. But we've got the adventurous Wim, who is a big fan of Jedi stories, looking for action and adventure to kind of escape the monotony of life on Attin. It's a very civilian lifestyle. He's got a very cautious but very cute friend, Neil, who I believe at the moment we don't know Neil's species. It's very similar to Ortolan's, to Max Rebo's species, but it's definitely not the same. As far as I'm aware, they're just being referred to as Neil's species still. We've got the rebellious and bullshitting Fern as well, who becomes Captain Fern, captain of the Onyx Cinder. And we've got a cool and calculated KB as well. And the 4 of them find a ship together, the Onyx Cinder, and they go off on an adventure. They get whisked away, taken past the barrier that kind of encloses their planet from the rest of the galaxy, hides it from the rest of the galaxy, and keeps everybody on Attin. And they fly off in this ship that they found into the forest, into an adventure, a mystery that they've got to unravel around their home world, and plenty of pirates and an action adventure along the way. Now, what I will say is, I'm easily pleased when it comes to Star Wars. I'm very open and honest about that. If it's called Star Wars, I'm probably going to enjoy it. I like that we're getting more content when it comes to Star Wars than ever before, and personally I think that can only be a good thing. That being said, I do still expect good quality, but I think it's a really good thing, and it's really important as well that when it comes to representation and diversity of kind of styles and what people like, preference, perception, I think it's really important to get a bit of a smorgasbord of media. And I really genuinely feel like that's what we're getting with Star Wars at the moment. I feel like there could be more diversities when it comes to the stories being told, but definitely more so now than ever before. And I think that's really important. It feels like there is something for almost everyone now. And if you don't like certain things, I think that's fine, because the likelihood is that there will still be certain things in Star Wars that you enjoy, and that's your Star Wars. That's fine. You don't need to like it all. There are certainly parts of Star Wars that I enjoy more than others. But when it comes to me, I am really pleased. I'm really easily pleased, I think, in the most part. And to be honest, I think, talking about that, how there is such a diversity and there's something there for everyone, I think there's part of me that's been a little bit kind of disheartened when it comes to talking about Star Wars since the last live-action Star Wars series that we got with The Acolyte and the backlash around that. Like I said, I think, everybody likes different things, and it's important to criticize quality and stuff like that. But just seeing the backlash online around The Acolyte, it just felt entirely based in ignorance and intolerance. And I don't want to generalize, there will be people who don't like it based upon quality storytelling, whatever, or just personal preference. and that's fine. But there was so much hate and vitriol that went around because of the Acolyte, and that really disappointed me. It definitely disheartened me when it comes to talking about Star Wars and sharing kind of my thoughts on Star Wars with the wider Star Wars community. And I think that left a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth going into Skeleton Crew, I think, because I was like, are we just going to get those people just criticizing it again because it's it's something that they just don't like. Personally, I really enjoyed the Acolyte. It's probably my favorite live action Star Wars series. It's either that or Ahsoka. I think it was amazing. I'm a huge fan of the High Republic. I was definitely kind of the target audience of the Acolyte, and it delivered for me. I thought it was amazing, and I'm really disappointed that we won't be getting a second series. I really hope that the kind of backlash that the people who created the Acolyte faced, I hope that doesn't happen with Skeleton Crew, because they're just kids. The main cast are just kids. I do think it's absolutely fine to share your opinion, have healthy conversations about everything, but I think the second that you attack someone based upon just simply who they are, race, gender, sexual orientation, ethnicity, whatever it may be, I think that's bang out of order. I just lose all respect for your opinion in that case. And equally, if you try and invalidate someone's opinion, you can not like it. You just don't need to bring it down for everyone else. And I think that's really important to say, because that's definitely been something on my mind when it comes to Star Wars media in the last few months. But that being said, let's talk about Skeleton Crew. I didn't mean to go that deep so early on into the podcast. So let's talk about my thoughts on Skeleton Crew so far. So overall, I am enjoying it, but I think I'm just enjoying it. It's really fun, but it is just fun. So I think if I'd kind of gone into it with that expectation, I'd be loving it. And I am really enjoying it. I think I'd been so hyped up by that final trailer. And actually, I think, I didn't really have any kind of expectations going into Skeleton Crew literally until maybe the last month when we got a trailer and stuff like that. Because it just felt like it was one of those things that kept on being discussed and then kind of kicked along. The only time where it actually came onto my radar really was at Celebration. And honestly, before that, I didn't even know if it was a film or a series. I just feel like we've not seen or heard anything about it up until we got that trailer. And I thought the trailer looked really cool, and I've been really hyped going into it. I'm loving all the references and kind of the aesthetic of the world that they're creating within Skeleton Crew. And I am enjoying it. It is a fun adventure. I think, the mystery as well that's slowly being developed, I think is really cool. I do feel like there's not much story there yet, or much kind of character development. But one of the things I do really like is that I like that you can clearly tell that it's been influenced by kind of older TV serials. And I think the director John Watts mentioned about older pirate serials on TV and how that was a big influence. So that's really cool to see. I'm loving all the references, all the little Easter eggs as well. And I'll get into that in a moment. But I feel like there's potential for more kind of story, and especially with this mystery that it's setting up with everything that's happening on Attin and the pirates and who's Jude Law's character, Jod. So yeah, at the moment, I feel like that's lacking a little bit. It's a little bit lackluster in terms of story, and it's not really drawn me into any of the episodes just yet, but I feel like there's potential there. Another thing that I really like is I really love the attention being put into aliens, especially in episode 2. I thought that was really cool, and the practical effects that they're using, I think that is just really cool to see that kind of representation. And it's also really cool that we're getting one of the 4 main characters, or the 4 kids, is an alien as well. I think that's really cool, and something that hasn't really been done in a Star Wars series before, except for Ahsoka obviously, but that's a well-established character. So I really like that it does genuinely feel like they're trying to show a lot of diversity here, and it's really, really cool. I don't feel like, on the point of the main characters, I don't feel like we've really seen any depth into any of the characters at all yet, if I'm honest. But that's one of the things that I enjoy the most about these Star Wars series. But at the end of the day, they are just kids, so it's just not my personal preference. Like, I can appreciate that. So yeah, I am enjoying it so far, but I think it is just that very surface level of like, it is just a fun show. I think one thing that's definitely kind of been sparked in my mind as I've been watching it, one of the things that I was kind of concerned with going into this series was I felt like a lot of the kind of marketing around it, or any discussions that had been done around Skeleton Crew, it was just mentioned that it was just, the Goonies or Stranger Things, but Star Wars. And for me, that feels very much like a trope, like it's just a marketing kind of trope. I like it when, we try new things with Star Wars. I think you've got to have kind of inspiration, but it just being Goonies or Stranger Things. But Star Wars, I feel like, I don't know, it leaves something to be desired for me. I just don't feel like it's very fresh or original. And personally, I really get that feeling with like the first few episodes, especially the first episode. That really just gave me like vibes of they've just picked up the Stranger Things script and just been like, oh, let's add in some Star Wars words. Make sure you say speeder and droids and stuff. And yeah, I wasn't a big fan of that, if I'm honest. But on that point, let's start to break down the episodes. So episode 1 was called This Could Be a Real Adventure. I did think it was, it was a good episode. I definitely don't think it's the strongest opening episode of a Star Wars series. It felt quite slow. It did build up the adventure well, and I think it introduced us to the characters. And I really, really liked seeing a very grounded story in Star Wars. So we actually got to see what civilians go through in a galaxy far, far away. That was really cool. Like, just what do ordinary people's lives look like in Star Wars. I loved the references to the holiday special as well. I thought that was really cool. But if I'm honest, it didn't really get me hyped for the rest of the series. It didn't fill me with excitement. It was a fun watch, but I definitely don't think it was the strongest opening episode that we've had of a Star Wars series. That changed for me personally with episode 2, which was called Way, Way Out Past the Barrier. That is by far my favourite episode of the series so far. I love SM-33, voiced by Nick Frost. I think that droid is a fantastic character. Like, definitely keeping up that theme of, droids being a real present, and an amazing character when it comes to new Star Wars. K2SO, BB-8, R2-D2 obviously. So I liked that. I thought that was really cool. I'm a big fan of how SM-33 woke up and instantly tried to murder some children. I love that. But yeah, just a really cool character. And I feel like he's been consistent throughout the first 4 episodes as well. Definitely, probably my favourite character. Seeing all the aliens and the ships at Port Bogo was really cool. I love the design of the ships. I think the Onyx Cinder itself is a really cool design. I love the VTOL engines, and I just think it looks cool. It's a good aesthetic to the series. It was great to understand as well how, I'm going to use the word normal here, but when I say that, I mean obviously like in reference to pirates, how normal life looks like in the galaxy, so how pirates just operate in the galaxy. But also with like all the refueling and stuff, I thought that was really cool to just see it on screen. In this episode, we're also introduced to Jude Law's character, Jod Narnawood, and he seems like a really interesting character. I think as well that like brought the series to life a little bit more for me, got a bit more depth to that character, and I'm really interested to find out more about him. Obviously he appears to use the Force in this episode and then moving forward as well. I do think he could genuinely be Force sensitive, and I think that could be a really interesting angle to take on this series. And I would also like it, like, I know a lot of people think that the whole Order 66 survivor trope is kind of worn out by now when it comes to basing a story around a Jedi past the prequel trilogy. I get that. I genuinely do. Personally, I don't feel that way, but I do see it. It's happened a lot, and it brings into question how effective Order 66 actually was, and how good Palpatine was moving forward. But I do think it could be really cool to see an Order 66 survivor take a very different path to any other survivor that we've seen so far. I think we really saw that in like Baylan Skoll in Ahsoka. I felt like that. And I think he's been a real standout character when it comes to new Star Wars media. So I think we could get something between like Balen Skull and like Kanan Jarrus at the beginning of Rebels. I think that would be a really cool story arc for Jod, and I'd be here for that. I think that'd be really, really cool to pursue that. I just think it'd be really cool to see him as a Force sensitive. And kind of the one thing that I really hope we don't see with Jod's character is that, you know, he isn't a very nice guy who then becomes a nice guy, you know, in the final episode of the series, because like he's won over by the kids and, you know, their bravery and you know, all of that. I think it would be cool if he was just genuinely a good guy who's been brought into some like wrong circumstances. I feel like that would give him good like complexity. So I hope that he isn't just kind of just won over at the end, but purely because they're kids. I'd like to see a bit more complexity there. Moving on to episode 3, which was called Very Interesting as an Astrogation Problem. This was another really solid episode for me. I do feel like this episode was delivered, and it was really nice to see some lore built up around the Old Republic with the hidden planets. And how I kind of read that was a bit of a soft launch into that era for Disney. You know, I feel like we've been moving towards that era very slowly with things like the High Republic. You know, they've remastered Knights of the Old Republic. I feel like this could be a great opportunity to soft launch, you know, learning more about that era. Again, nice reference to the original 70s comic book series with Crimson Jack, so this was another really good Easter egg, and I do feel like this series is littered with them. It does genuinely feel like it's been made by Star Wars fans. And the Easter eggs don't feel too on the nose as well. It doesn't feel like they're just shoved in there all over the place. Like, it feels really well done. It feels very subtle, and I like that. And I think the real standout in this episode for me was Jude Law. Really great as Jod here. Compelling performance. Really enjoying that mystery of his character that developed more in this particular episode. I know that they're hinting that he's shady, but like I said, I hope that he is a good guy who's been brought into the wrong circumstances, and you know, he's good in the end, but not just because, you know, he's been brought around by the kids. I feel like it would be nice if he was just a good guy. Episode 4, Can't Say I Remember No Attin. On that point as well, I really like how all of the episode titles are like common phrases that we hear throughout the series. I think that's really cool. I feel like this episode was one that particularly disappointed me, if I'm honest. I feel like it tried to be really action orientated, but it just didn't land well, in my opinion. Especially because, like, you know, a huge part of the story was just based around child soldiers. Like, I don't know. Like, yeah, and also like Neil's privilege when he was talking to, I can't remember the character's name now, but like the girl who he like meets up with, and like I just feel like when she's talking about how she has to fight to survive, literally to eat and get the resources that they need to live, and he's just like, yeah, we don't fight on my planet, maybe you should just try, you know, not fighting. And it's like, okay, Neil, yeah, like, good job. Like, I get the message that we're trying to convey there, but like when we're on that rooftop and Neil says that to her, I was just like, come on, Neil, read the room. Like, she's had such a hard life. She's got so much like on her plate, on her mind, and she, like all of the people around her are starving and struggling to survive. And you're like, yeah, my planet is amazing. Like, we've got everything that we could possibly need. We don't need to fight. There's no struggle. Just stop fighting. Just get food. I don't know. It really like it read to me like when, you know, the older generations are like, you want to buy a house? Don't buy Costa. It's just like, that's not the problem, Neil. Come on, look around you. So yeah, that just didn't land well for me at all. I really get what they were trying to do, but it didn't land well. I do like the growing mystery of the kind of the hidden worlds and why they're being hidden from the galaxy. How long has this been going on? Has it been going on from, you know, the time of the Old Republic? There's been a few references to like the Galactic Civil War in particular when that was mentioned, and I can't remember which character said it, but they were like, what war? Did they know about the Clone Wars? Like, we don't know yet, or at least I've not picked up on it, so interested to find out about that. Do the people on Attin know what's going on? Who is the supervisor as well? I think like that really came to my mind in this episode in particular when we go to the Supervisor's Tower in Akron. So yeah, lots of questions there, and I am enjoying that mystery that's gradually being built up, and it feels like it's been done in the right way as well. I really liked the last kind of 5 minutes. I feel like that was all that was really needed for this episode, where it had any kind of like impact on the story overall. I know a lot of people are going to call this episode a filler episode, and I see that. I usually like filler episodes, especially in series like The Bad Batch, but this, where we've only got 8 episodes and there is a lot of potential of the story and the mystery, yeah, it felt like a bit of a waste of time, bit of a waste of screen time for me, this episode. But the last episode, the last 5 minutes of the episode did actually save it for me. I liked seeing how these kids actually kind of confronted and how they handled that they're actually in genuine danger and they're showing that vulnerability. I liked that. I thought that was really interesting how they actually just confronted that. And also, obviously, SM33 going off the rails as well, going on a rampage again. Big fan of how he's just trying to murder kids. What the fuck, Disney? But yeah, no, I liked that. It felt genuinely tense. And if I'm honest, that was the first time watching Skeleton Crew where I've had any kind of emotional reaction to it. So that was really cool. I did kind of call the 33 twist where, you know, his memory was just hidden away by order of his previous captain. It was still clever. I liked it. It was kind of expected, but I thought it was really well done. So I'm a big fan of that last 5 minutes. There are 4 more episodes still to come. I'm looking forward to them, if I'm honest, especially after the end of that last episode. I think the mystery that's been developed has a lot of potential. I'm really enjoying that. And I'm having fun watching it. But like I said, it is just fun. So if I'd gone in with that expectation of like, it's just going to be a fun watch, you know, much like, I think it rings very similar to things like Resistance, Book of Boba Fett for me, where, yeah, it's not something I could watch over and over and over again, but it's really fun. And I'm enjoying watching it. And like I said at the beginning of this podcast, before I just rambled on, I'm just enjoying that we're getting more Star Wars content. I think that's really cool. So I think there's a lot of potential in this series. I'm not sure if I can say it's meeting my expectations just yet. I don't want to judge, you know, everything until I've seen the entire series as well. We're halfway through the story being told here, so I don't think you can judge it. And I think the quality of the actual like production, fantastic. Can't fault that whatsoever. It looks amazing, and I love the aesthetic and the design choices that are being made. So I'm excited to see the last half of this series. And so far I'm enjoying watching it, but it is just that very surface level kind of feeling as I'm watching it. So that's Skeleton Crew. Let's move on to something upcoming as well. Slightly change of pace here. We're going to talk about the January 1st Lego Star Wars releases. And again, I feel like I'm going to have a bit of a downbeat tone for a first episode of a podcast. Maybe first and last, people. But there are 6 new Lego Star Wars sets being released on New Year's Day. I'm not going to talk about the 4+ Mando's N1 Starfighter, because I'm just not the intended audience. So I don't feel right giving any kind of, review of that. Initial thoughts on that, because it's just not for me. Like, of course I'm not going to enjoy it. It's not for me. But that leaves 5 other sets, and I'm going to start off this time by going through them one by one. I will say I was really kind of excited by the rumors. I feel like this wave had a lot of potential. Let's get into it. So the first set I'm going to talk about is the one that I was anticipating the most. It's set 75402, the ARC 170 Starfighter, which will retail in the UK for £59.99, and it's going to come with 497 pieces and 3 Clone Pilot minifigures. It comes with Oddball Jag, and I think it is just a generic Clone Pilot, and a green R4P44 astromech droid, which I think is a really cool callback to the previous version, which I think came out in 2010, because that was also R4P44. So I like that. This was my most anticipated set, because the ARC 170 Starfighter is far and away my favorite Starfighter design in the whole of Star Wars. I just love it. I think it looks rugged. I think it just looks fucking cool. So I am a huge fan of the Starfighter design. I was so excited when the rumors came out that this set, was going to be re-released in Lego Star Wars. If I'm honest, I'm disappointed. I think if I'm perfectly honest, I think it's a case of I'd hyped up so much in my mind where it maybe could never have lived up to those expectations. But I feel like it's quite small. It feels like one of these scaled down versions that Lego Star Wars is doing at the moment with things like the X-Wing, the TIE Fighter, Boba Fett's Starfighter. And I'm disappointed by that. Because the thing that I love about the Arc 170 is just how menacing it looks, how big and beefy it looks, like a fighter plane in real life. I like that. I think especially around like the engines and the cannons in this new version, they look too smooth, too small, and the wingspan doesn't look proportionate. It just looks really scaled down. So I do still think it looks cool. I think it is a good design, especially the fuselage. I think it looks really cool as a build. But it would have been a day one purchase for me. I think it's on the expensive side. I definitely won't be picking it up on day one. I am disappointed. I will pick it up at some point because the Arc 170 is my favourite, but I'll be waiting for it to go down because it is very expensive for what it is. The next set I'm going to talk about, which kind of tied in to the Arc 170 in my mind when it was rumoured, is set 75401, which is Ahsoka's Jedi Interceptor from the Clone Wars. That's going to retail in this country for £39.99 with a build of 290 pieces. And just looking at this and comparing it to the retail price of previous Eta Actis Jedi Interceptors in Lego, it's so expensive. Like, it really is. It looks really cool. I love the design. The colours look amazing, and the minifigures look amazing as well. But it's just so expensive. And I'm struggling to see why, if I'm honest. And I remember back in my good old days when you could get a Jedi Interceptor for £20. That wasn't that long ago. But yeah, I don't know. I do like the design. I think it looks cool. I actually like the new cockpit design as well. I don't think there's anything wrong with the previous version. I can't say one is better than the other, but I do like it. I've seen some people like kick off about it. I like it. I think it looks cool. I mentioned as well that there was a connection between this and the Arc 170 in my mind, and it also comes into another set that's rumored for a future wave of 2025, and that's because all of those have a link to Kata Neimoidia in canon. So that episode of the Clone Wars where Ahsoka is flying her Jedi Interceptor and she rescues Anakin, that happens on Kata Neimoidia. And the Arc 170 scene where they shoot down Plo Koon during Order 66, that also happens on Kata Neimoidia in Revenge of the Sith. So there was that link there, which I thought was really cool. I like that it crosses both Revenge of the Sith and the Clone Wars, and it all links together. I understand now the current rumour is that Plo Koon's Jedi Starfighter is actually going to be a microfighter, which I'm a little disappointed by, but I don't think it takes that much away from it. But yeah, coming back to Ahsoka's Jedi Interceptor, again, it's another set that I'll definitely pick up. I will wait for this to go down because it will inevitably go down. It's just so expensive, but it looks really cool. Moving on to set 75404, which is the Starship Collection Acclamator class assault ship. That's going to retail in the UK for £44.99 and comes with 450 pieces. Again, really expensive and really small. I like the Starship Collection. I think they look amazing on display. They're really fun builds, actually. I really enjoy the builds. And I think they're a great alternative to, these huge UCS sets that we're getting now that are just ridiculously expensive, like so far removed from a lot of people's, price range that they just can't afford them. So I like that. It does make me feel like with a lot of these ships, a lot of really iconic ships, they're just doing them so that they don't have to do them in system sets. I feel like there are a lot of, fan requested ships that people want as like play scale ships, and so it just makes me feel like we're not going to get them, and I think the Acclamator is a key point of that. But I'm a big fan of how it's based on the Clone Wars and not Attack of the Clones, and I do think it looks like a really good design. It looks like a fun build. So again, I will be picking this up, but I will be waiting until it goes on sale because it just seems so expensive. Moving on to the other Starship collection being released in this wave, the Home 1 Star Cruiser, which is set number 75405, retails in this country for £59.99 and comes with 559 pieces. I think the theme of this wave is just how overpriced all the sets are. I think, if I'm honest, I think this is like the least overpriced of all of the sets. But yeah, if I'm honest, I think this is probably my favourite of a wave now that we've had official set images. It looks amazing. I love the look of the build. Love the Easter eggs as well. But again, it just feels really expensive. But I'm glad that we're getting Home 1. Like, I think that's really cool. Yeah, I'm a big fan of it. And I do think it is a set that wouldn't sell well as a UCS. I'm not sure how they could make it in system scale because of all like the curvature and stuff. So yeah, I like this set. This is probably my favourite set of a wave. And then finally, we've got set 75404, which is the buildable Grogu with hoverpram set. And that retails for, I believe it's £89.99. I actually haven't got it written down. If I'm honest, I don't see the point in this set. It's not been that long since we had the last buildable Grogu figure. And it feels like a downgrade from that set, just from the set pictures, in my personal opinion. I've got that set, the previous Grogu set, so I think this one might be one that I miss, because it doesn't do anything for me personally. It's not an upgrade on the previous version. I don't understand why they've released it in January as well. If they'd have pushed it back for when like the Mandalorian and Grogu film comes out, I think that it would be a very different story. So yeah, I'm not quite sure why it's releasing in January. I don't see the purpose of this set, but if you haven't got that previous buildable Grogu, this could be a good set. I can see that, I can appreciate that, but for me, it's just not for me. I'm out. So overall, I am a little bit disappointed in this wave. I think all of the sets on their own are all right in their own right, but I just think across the board, they're so overpriced, and I think there was so much potential there that hasn't been delivered on, especially when I'm looking at things like the ARC 170, and we could have had a system scale acclimator instead. That would have been really cool, and we just haven't. I'm left a little disappointed, if I'm honest. I probably will still end up getting definitely the 2 Starship collection and the ARC 170 and the Ahsoka's Jedi Interceptor sets, but yeah, overall, it doesn't scream out as, an iconic Lego Star Wars wave. It doesn't do anything for me personally. So that's my thoughts on the New Year's Day Lego Star Wars releases. Moving on to a section I'm going to call Expanding Universe, and we're going to talk about the latest Star Wars book that I read, which is actually this one right here, Mace Windu, The Glass Abyss by Stephen Barnes. I'll start off by saying I'm not actually a huge fan of Mace Windu as a character. Loved him as a kid because purple is my favourite colour, and so I just thought he was really cool because he had a purple lightsaber, and he's a badass, let's face it, he is a badass. But I just feel like, as I've grown up, and I like to think matured, I've just found his character a bit bland. Like, he is just a badass character. And actually, I feel like the way that he treated Anakin and just his arrogance really personifies. And I think actually this is the intention of his character. That's how I read it anyway. And I think in that way, really cool, really well written, well developed character. But I just feel like he personifies the arrogance and the hubris and the kind of dogmatic nature of the Jedi during this period in the Star Wars galaxy. Saying that actually made me really excited for this book, because I felt like we were going to get a little bit more depth to his character in canon. So I was really excited by that. I did find it a strange choice of character, if I'm honest, for an entire novel to be based around. But I was like, yeah, it's going to show an entirely different dimension to Mace, so that's pretty cool. I'm looking forward to it. I really enjoyed the book. I'll start off by giving it a rating. I think it's a solid 9 out of 10 for me, which, if I'm honest, surprised me. I wasn't expecting to enjoy it that much. And I actually did find it a little difficult to kind of get into at first. I felt like, not that it jumped around very much, but there were a few kind of complex concepts that are a bit of an undertone. They lay the foundations of the entire story. And I found that a little bit mind-bending just with the way it was written to start off with. But actually, when I got into it, I really enjoyed it. I thought the pacing was amazing. It reads very much like a Clone Wars arc, and the character development when it comes to Mace Windu, it just comes across like that. It just comes across like you're watching an episode of Clone Wars. So I thought that was really cool. I mentioned there are a few kind of complex concepts. So one of those is just the planet that this is based on in the first place, Metagos, and the solar catastrophe that happens that forces all of the people who live on the surface to flee underground, and how that sets up actually, the story and how the criminal elements take control over the people and they keep them kind of oppressed. I thought that was a really cool concept. And when you begin to get into kind of just life on Metagos in the underground, in the Glass Abyss, I thought it was really cool. And the main villain, Chulok, really, really interesting villain. And I think the perfect kind of foil. He worked perfectly opposite Mace Windu. So yeah, a big fan of that. And I really, really enjoyed reading it all. I think especially like the latter half of the book, when Mace Windu is really interacting with like the Saad, and he integrates into their culture, and we learn more about their culture and how they've lived on Metagos. Kinshan Nightbird, who is one of the main kind of characters introduced in this book, and also a love interest for Mace Windu, which I thought was a really interesting concept to introduce as well. Not sure like how that plays into Mace Windu's character moving forward, but I still thought it was a really interesting concept within this story. I loved that, and it did show an entirely different side to Mace Windu. But yeah, definitely one of my favorite characters here, and I think through her, I loved exploring the metaphor for the Force that they use on Metagos, the web, what the Saad call the web, and how at first like Mace Windu interprets it, and I think therefore you as the reader, certainly this is how I interpreted it, as it's just another name for the Force. But then how you learn throughout the book, and you learn as Mace is learning as well, that this actually means the web of life across the planet, and how all living creatures live in harmony together. They have a harmony together, and they work as one living organism. So I thought that was a really cool concept to explore. I really enjoyed that. And one of the things that I enjoy the most about Star Wars is actually finding out more about different cultures and different interpretations and perceptions of the Force. That's one of the reasons that I love the High Republic so much, is that we do get to see how different Force sensitives interact with the Force in completely different ways. I think that is such a cool concept in Star Wars, but in real life, that's something that I'm really passionate about. So to see that developed further in this book, I thought was really, really cool. I loved that. And it includes plenty of references to my favorite Jedi, Qui-Gon Jinn. So yeah, it really ticks a lot of boxes for me. Another concept that I really liked was dream infiltration. And I think that ties in really well to the final battle, which I thought was amazing. Again, really enjoyed that latter half of the book. And I think the pacing was amazing with like the battle. I feel like we were given, I can't remember exactly, but like a solid 100 pages dedicated just to this huge battle. So you really felt that scale and the impact that it was having on people's lives. I really enjoyed that. So yeah, overall, a fantastic read for me. I'm not sure if I can say it's a must read for Star Wars fans, but I really enjoyed reading it, and a solid 9 out of 10. It surprised me a lot. I was expecting to enjoy it, but definitely not that much. So yeah, big fan of Mace Windu: The Glass Abyss by Stephen Barnes. Check it out for yourself. It's available now at all good retailers, and really, really fun read. Moving on now to a segment that I'm going to call A Long Time Ago in a Galaxy Far, Far Away. Original, I know, very inventive. But basically in every episode, I'm going to be talking about a specific moment from the Galaxy Far, Far Away. I kind of reference certain moments in Star Wars media as, well, just that, Star Wars moments. And for me, that's a moment where everything comes together perfectly to create true magic. That feeling that you got watching Star Wars as a kid. A moment that is really meaningful and you kind of take forward in your life. Elements like the story, the dialogue, the music, the cinematography, the messages and the symbolism, character development, story development, how everything comes together perfectly in a moment to really create what makes Star Wars so special. Star Wars for me is obviously a huge part of my life, and those moments really make Star Wars more than just cool science fiction movies. So I'm going to talk about kind of my golden example of what I define as a Star Wars moment in this first episode, and I think it'll stand out for a lot of people. It's a scene that never fails to inspire me or make me smile like a child, and it is something that, like I said, I definitely take forward and I actually think about a lot. It does make me, go into deep thought whenever I think about it. And the scene that I'm talking about is in Empire Strikes Back, where our little green friend lifts everyone's favourite farm boy's X-Wing out of the swamp. And, it just seems unbelievable, after all the training that Luke's been through, everything that he's seen, and then to see him in such astonishment at what's just happened in front of his eyes. And again, we've got the music and the dialogue all coming together perfectly. That is my golden example of a Star Wars moment, of something that really makes Star Wars Star Wars. I think for me, the dialogue is something that really stands out. It's so quotable and so significant and so impactful. It's probably the most iconic piece of prose in the entire franchise for me personally. It's something that I think about a lot. We've got that wisdom of Yoda, the kind of naivete, the ignorance of Luke Skywalker. As I said, even after everything that he's seen, and he's being a bit petulant here without being overbearingly arrogant. We see those elements of kind of farm boy Luke and Anakin Skywalker, and we see how this is really a pivotal moment for him. And it's delivered by Mark Hamill in such a fantastic way that really conveys Luke's frustration, the expectations that he's placing on himself, the expectations that he's facing. And not just from himself as well. He's got expectations there from Yoda, from Obi-Wan, from the rebellion, from his friends. But I do think ultimately it comes down to he's placing a lot of responsibility and expectation on himself, understandably. But I think that's so important to see and so important to kind of remember moving forward in everyday life. We've all done that. I've definitely done that. I do it a lot. So it's. I think that's why it's so important to me to understand that there are some things that you can't comprehend because of all of your previous experiences, because of your perception on life. I think that's really important to see, and I think it is delivered just so well in this movie, in this scene in particular. And there are so many iconic lines that perfectly bring to life what Star Wars means to me in this scene in particular. What kind of my Star Wars is, what my definition of Star Wars is. And linking back to what I said at the beginning of the episode, we all have a different perception of Star Wars as well. We all have different kind of preferences, different things that we like, different styles. I think that's so important, and I am very open to a lot of things in Star Wars. I like new, fresh ideas and concepts, but this really, I think, laid the foundation for me as a kid as to what Star Wars means, and it's had a huge impact on me as a person, on my kind of thinking, on my perception of the world, on the kind of person that I want to be. I think there are just so many iconic lines. So we've got things like Yoda saying, "So certain are you, always with you, it cannot be done." Challenging Luke in that way into saying, you are just focusing on what your worldview is. No, it's no different, only different in your mind. You must unlearn what you have learned. That is just such a fantastic line. I love that. If you want to move forward, sometimes you do have to let go of your expectations, of your preferences, of your natural kind of instincts. I love that. That is a sentence that I think about a lot, that I quote a lot. And I think the most iconic for me has to be, no, try not. Do or do not. There is no try. I think it seems so simple on the surface, but I think there's been so many moments in my life where I've thought about that. When I've had thoughts spiraling out of control in my mind, or I've faced anxiety, and I've been I need to get over this. I need to move past this, and I'm I know that there are some things that are a little bit irrational going on in my mind right now. I just need to kind of, let go of it. And I can't try to do it, I've just got to do it. It's so hard to do, but ultimately for me, like, that's what it comes down to. You have to do it. And so I think that's just so impactful. It seems so simple, but there's such a layer of complexity there, which I think there's a reason that it keeps on getting mentioned in Star Wars media, because it is just an incredible line. There are others as well here that I've written down, things like size matters not, my ally is the Force. Yoda's description as well of the Force, I think, is such a cool, not contrast, but it just works so well with how Obi-Wan described the Force to Luke in A New Hope. So life creates it, makes it grow. Its energy surrounds us and binds us. Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. You must feel the Force around you. I think, I love that, how it just symposes perfectly with what Obi-Wan says. It is a different perspective, but they're describing the same thing. And I think that's one thing that I find really interesting about perception as a concept, because an example that I use a lot is, how can you prove to me that we are seeing the same color? If I point at something and I say, that's blue, most people would agree with me, because we've all been told at some point in our lives, that is blue. Someone has pointed at something and it's a learned behavior. How can you prove that we are seeing exactly the same thing? I don't think you can. It's like you can't prove that we taste the same things. So I appreciate that's maybe a little bit deep and a little bit, kind of out there for a Star Wars podcast, but it's something that I find really interesting. I feel like that is definitely maybe something that was subliminally planted in my head as a child watching Empire Strikes Back. And it is something that I think about a lot, perception. And I think what ties this, all together is Luke's line at the end where he says, "I don't believe it," and then Yoda's response, "That is why you fail." I'm getting goosebumps just saying it, and I'm not even doing a shitty Yoda impression. I just think it's such an iconic scene, amazing dialogue, and the other thing as well is, the music, how that slowly builds up, and then there is that element at the end where, it's a little bit ominous and there's a little bit of uncertainty. It's just incredible, how it builds. I can hear it now as I'm picturing, the X-Wing coming out of a swamp and coming towards the shore, and Yoda's face of concentration, and a beautiful piece of character development done there retroactively. How we see Yoda do this, so calm. It's not really an effort for him, and he's lifting a full starfighter which weighs tons of metal. He's lifting towards him, and he doesn't break a sweat. Size matters not. But then flashback to Attack of the Clones when Count Dooku brings down the roof and the pillar towards Anakin and Obi-Wan and himself, and he's putting a lot of effort, a lot of exertion into that. So actually understanding that Yoda has learned a lot. We see Yoda as this super wise being, and actually we see in the prequels, I think, and throughout the Clone Wars definitely, how Yoda still has a lot to learn. I think Yoda got into a little bit of arrogance in the lead up to the Phantom Menace, and then actually his understanding that he's still got training, and we see him talk about that in Revenge of the Sith when he's conversing. Well, we don't see it, but he's conversing with Qui-Gon Jinn. We know that now. So I think that's really cool, but we do see that actually Yoda has done training and he's grown stronger in the Force by just accepting, do or do not, there is no try. Incredible. And then I think we'll finish off today's episode and maybe podcast moving forward with a little bit of a what if scenario. I know a lot of people talk about how they want a what if series for Star Wars. I think that'd be really cool. Personally, I don't feel like we need it, but I think it'd be really cool. I definitely enjoy it. So let's do it right now. What if Luke lifted the X-Wing out of the swamp first time? So what if he just did it? What if he just did it effortlessly? And I think this is a really interesting concept for me, because I feel like in some of the expanded media that we've had, Yoda does have, you know, a little bit more of a reluctance to train Luke initially. And we see that in Empire Strikes Back, but then also like that understanding behind why he feels reluctant to do that, I think has been explored more in wider media, like the comic books and stuff. I think that's really cool. I think it's mentioned from a certain point of view as well, the Empire Strikes Back one. So I think that's really cool. I also think I like this kind of theory. I don't know if it's ever been explicitly confirmed, but I do like the theory that, and there's a lot of strong evidence that Yoda actually would have preferred to train Leia in the ways of the Force, in the ways of a Jedi, instead of Luke. You know, he mentions, no, there is another, straight away as soon as Luke flies off. You know, a lot of what he says about Luke when communing with Obi-Wan before agreeing to train Luke, you know, he sees many of Anakin's qualities in Luke, and I think that's very obviously being done when developing the character of Anakin Skywalker retroactively, and, you know, his downfall into Vader. I think that's really cool. I think that's, you know, there's a lot of parallels between Anakin and Luke, and I think my second golden example of, you know, a Star Wars moment for me would definitely be in Return of a Jedi, where Luke throws his lightsaber away and he says, "No, I am a Jedi like my father before me." So we actually see, you know, the difference there between Anakin and Luke's character. And again, I think that links back to this scene actually really well, because that is Luke doing it. He is being a Jedi. You know, he's not trying to be a Jedi. He just throws his lightsaber away and he goes, "No, I'm accepting the light side. I'm accepting the consequences. You know, I'm probably going to die here, but I am a Jedi, like my father before me." But yeah, I like that, the parallels between Luke and Anakin as characters, and I can see why Yoda would fear that a lot. I also think it's really cool to link it forward to like The Last Jedi, how and Return of a Jedi as well, how he then comes to accept Luke actually as a Jedi. You know, he is not the last hope, but he is a new hope for the galaxy. So again, it's showing Yoda's character development there. I think these are lots of subtle things when it comes to Yoda that are really, really cool. I think especially like it gets overlooked a lot in the Clone Wars. You know, especially like the arcs where he does learn to preserve his consciousness in the Force past death, I think is really cool. But yeah, going slightly off topic. You know, Yoda probably had it on his mind how the Council agreed to train Anakin at an older age than they usually do. And Luke was much older than Anakin. So seeing those parallels, I can understand why there's that bit of reluctance. So actually, if Luke had lifted the X-Wing, you know, first time, and Luke had just done it, not tried, would this have made Yoda feel more assured in his choice to even begin to train Luke? Or would he have been more worried? I think this is a really interesting concept for me, because Yoda was concerned most with losing Luke to Palpatine. You know, someone who has a very strong natural connection to the Force, someone who has the potential to be extremely powerful, you know, losing him to the dark side. And he's seen that, you know, and he mentions it, you know, just after this scene where Luke does fly off away from Dagobah in his X-Wing. You know, he mentions his failure in the cave, and, you know, remember it and don't go and fight Vader right now. There's so much opportunity for you to fall to the dark side here. He knows that. And he's worried about it. He's scared about it. And the Emperor says it as well. You know, Luke would be a powerful ally. Yoda is worried about losing two extremely powerful Skywalkers to the machinations of Palpatine. So actually, it does make me wonder, you know, would Yoda have felt more confident or less confident in his choice if he'd have seen just how naturally powerful Luke was? And I don't know. I think we see Yoda, you know, as wise and as amazing a Jedi as he is, he does have a lot of fear there, especially at that time, and he is running out of options for hope. I like to think, you know, my version of Yoda, I think would have been more assured, and he would have, in his own words, you know, he would have seen that Luke understands that you do have to do or do not. There is no try. And I think seeing that Luke understands that, and he has that trust and that faith in himself and his abilities, I think would have been really cool. And I think it would have made Yoda actually more confident in his choice. I think it maybe would have opened up the potential for Yoda to tell Luke at that point as well about Leia and bring Leia into the fold. And so actually the rebellion had even more of a chance going up against the Empire, against the Emperor and Vader, because there's two of them versus, you've got Luke and Leia versus Vader and Palpatine. So actually, I think Yoda would have maybe opened up that door a lot earlier than when he does tell Luke in Return of the Jedi, and brought Leia in for some training. So I think that could have been a really interesting concept as well to see. But yeah, I think that's my kind of initial thoughts on the immediate impact of that scenario. And I think with that, I'm going to bring this first episode of A Woody Strikes Back podcast to an end. So thank you very much for listening. Indeed, if you have made it this far through, I really appreciate it. I've got no idea when I'm going to record another one of these. Like I said, I didn't really have any plans to start this podcast now. It was just I got so many different Star Wars related things on my mind. I thought, let's talk about them all together. Let's make a podcast. I've been thinking about it for a while. Let's just do it. So let me know what you think to it in the comments. It may have been a load of shit. I don't know. I certainly hope not. But I hope you've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed just kind of rambling on. So I hope you've enjoyed my rambles too. But thank you for listening. And as always, may the Force be with you.